All right, let's crack open a literary mystery, one that revolves around one of the most influential books ever written, the Gospel of John. We're going to dive in and decode its unique and honestly unmistakable style.
You know that feeling, right? That's exactly what happens when a lot of people read the New Testament. You got the first 4 books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all telling the story of Jesus. But while the first 3 kind of march to a similar beat, John, well, it feels like it's playing a completely different song.
And look, this isn't just a hunch or some vague feeling. The Greek style in the 4th Gospel is so distinct, it basically stands in a category all by itself. This is a measurable literary fact, and today, we're going to dig into the evidence and crack the code on this author's signature style.
So where do we even begin? Well, the first and most obvious clue is in the words themselves, the author's very distinct vocabulary. It's not just what he says, but the specific words he chooses to say it with. And, maybe even more telling, the common words he decides to leave out completely.
I mean, just look at the sheer scale of the difference here. John's vocabulary is actually pretty small, but man, he uses certain words over and over again. Take love. It shows up 44 times in John. In the other 3 Gospels combined, only 30 times. You see the same pattern with words like truth, no, world, and life. He has his favorite themes, and believe me, he hammers them home.
And wow, this slide just says it all, doesn't it? Take a look at this disparity. The word Jews, which in this context often means the religious authorities, appears a staggering 66 times in John. In the other 3 Gospels put together, a mere 16 times. That single word choice dramatically changes the whole feel of the conflict in the story.
But what he doesn't say is just as revealing. Some of the core concepts from the other Gospels are just gone. The word parable, you'll see it 45 times in the other 3. In John, 0. The command to repent, about 25 times elsewhere, but not once in John. He doesn't even use the word gospel. It's not that he's ignoring the ideas, he's just speaking a completely different language to get them across.
Okay, so we've seen what words are different. Now let's talk about how the author actually puts his narrative together. A huge feature of his style is how he tends to step into the story and act like a helpful guide for you, the reader.
It's almost like the author hits the pause button on the action to give you these little footnotes. He knows he might be writing for a non-Jewish audience, so he'll explain cultural terms, clarify symbols, and make sure you're not getting the wrong idea. He'll even remind you who certain characters are. He is constantly making sure you're right there with him every step of the way.
This is a perfect example. The characters say, Rabbi, and John immediately jumps in with a little note in parentheses, which means teacher. He's not just a storyteller, he's a translator, making sure everyone, no matter their background, gets the full context.
Okay, this next one is a brilliant literary device John uses all the time to build tension and reveal these deeper truths. He just loves setting up scenes where characters completely misunderstand what Jesus is saying. Why? Because they're stuck hearing on a literal level while Jesus is speaking on a spiritual one.
So picture this scene. Jesus has just cleared out the temple, and the authorities come to him demanding a sign. And this is the one he gives them. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. It's a confusing, kind of provocative thing to say.
And of course, they are outraged. They immediately think of the massive, physical stone building they're standing in front of, the one that took 46 years to build. You're going to raise that in 3 days? No way! They're totally stuck on the literal, physical meaning. But the real question for us, the readers, is what was he actually talking about?
And this is where the author reveals the 2 layers of meaning. The listeners heard temple and thought of stone and mortar, but Jesus was using temple as a symbol for his own body. He was talking about his death and resurrection. It's a powerful moment where this misunderstanding becomes a prophecy, and we, the readers, get to be in on the secret.
And that brings us to what might be the greatest example of John's style, his incredible use of irony. This is when a character, usually an enemy of Jesus, says something that is way, way more true than they could possibly realize.
So here's the setup. The council is in a full-blown panic because Jesus is becoming too popular, and the high priest, Caiaphas, just cuts right through the noise with this cold, pragmatic statement.
Now, it's really important to understand what Caiaphas thinks he's saying. For him, this is just ruthless politics. He's saying, let's get rid of this one troublemaker before the Romans come in and crush our entire nation. It is a purely political move to save their own skins.
But here's the genius twist.
Without knowing it, without even remotely intending it, Jesus' greatest enemy prophesies the absolute heart of the Christian message, that one man, Jesus, would die for the sake of the people. It's what the source calls the irony of ironies, and it's just a stunning piece of literary craftsmanship. So, all of this leads to a central and kind of mind-bending question. If John's style is so incredibly unique, why does everybody in the book talk that way? Jesus, his disciples, his enemies, they all sound just like John. So what's going on? Well, the answer lies in how ancient historians understood their job.
The solution really comes down to this key distinction. On one hand, you have ipsissima verba, which means the very words, a literal, word-for-word recording, like a court transcript. But many careful historians back then were aiming for ipsissima vox, or the very voice. Their goal wasn't a perfect quote, but to faithfully capture the substance and meaning of what was said, and then summarize it in their own unique style.
So the process kind of looks like this. The author listens, he really gets the essential truth of the message, and then he retells it accurately, but through his own stylistic and theological lens. And that's exactly what's happening in the Gospel of John. Everyone speaks in John speak, because John is the one summarizing their very voice for us.
Think of it this way. A microphone just captures sound waves exactly as they are, but a portrait artist, they capture the essence, the character, the truth of a person. John isn't a stenographer with a microphone. He's an inspired artist painting a theological portrait to show us the deeper truth of who Jesus really is.
So after laying out all the clues, the unique vocabulary, the helpful footnotes, the dramatic misunderstandings, and the deep irony, what's the final verdict on the Johannine style?
Here's what it all boils down to. First, John's style is absolutely not an accident. It's a deliberate and really sophisticated choice. All these literary features we've talked about, they're tools he's using to communicate his specific theological message. He's acting as an inspired interpreter, not just a recorder, and his style is designed to pull you, the reader, past a surface-level reading and immerse you in the profound spiritual meaning of the story.
And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to think about, doesn't it? For any story, ancient or modern, how much does the unique style of the storyteller actually shape the substance of the story we end up hearing? It's a powerful reminder that how we say something is often just as important as what we say.